You ever notice something weird about some men? They walk into a room, and even if you know they're 40, 45, even 60, something about them just doesn't match the number, not in a fake youthful way, not in a trying too hard way. It's deeper than that. It's like life didn't sit heavy on them the same way it did on others. And then you look at another man, same age, same generation, but he looks older, not just in face, but in energy, tired eyes, tight expression, like life has been pressing on him for years. So the question is simple, but nobody really asks it properly. What is actually going on there? Because it's not just skincare, it's not just genetics, and honestly, it's not even luck. Something else is happening underneath. And this is where things get interesting, because according to the ideas of Carl Jung, the human face is never just a face. It's a story, a record of what the mind has carried, and what it has released. Now I know that might sound a bit deep, but stay with me, because this is where men start to recognize themselves. Let me ask you something real quick. How many things are you carrying right now that nobody sees? Not physical things. I'm talking about stress you never talked about, pressure you normalized, disappointments you laughed off, responsibilities you just absorbed without choice, emotions you decided to deal with later. Yeah, that kind of weight. Because here's the first truth most people miss. Aging on your face is not just time passing, it's unprocessed life sitting inside you. And some men, they process it differently. Not perfectly, not magically, but differently. Let's talk about that "you look younger" comment. You know that moment when someone says, "Bro, you don't even look your age." Most men just laugh it off like it's nothing, but internally, it makes you pause a little, because part of you wonders, what do they see that I don't? And here's where psychology gets interesting. Carl Jung talked about something called psychic energy. Basically, the idea that your inner state doesn't stay hidden, it leaks, not in words, in presence, in posture, in how your face holds tension, or doesn't. So when someone says you look younger, they're not just talking about wrinkles or skin, they're reacting to something much quieter, a kind of lightness, a looseness in your energy that most people lose over time. Now let's be real about men for a second, because this is where it hits differently. Most men don't even notice when they start aging faster emotionally than physically. It happens slowly. You start taking responsibility seriously, then too seriously, then personally, and before you realize it, life is no longer something you experience. It's something you manage. And that shift, it shows, not overnight, but gradually, in the face, in the eyes, in the way you sit in silence. You can literally see a man who stopped playing with life. And that's when aging starts to speed up inside first, then outside follows. But now here's the part that confuses people. Some men go through the same stress, same pressure, same life challenges, but they still look younger than expected. Why? This is where Jung's thinking gets close to something uncomfortable but powerful. It's not about avoiding life pressure. It's about how much of it you internalize. Some men carry life like, I am responsible for everything that happens to me. And that creates weight. Other men carry life like, I respond to what happens but I don't become it. That creates space. And space is what people read as youth. Let me make this more real. Think of two men, both go through failure. One man replays it in his mind for months, builds identity around it, tightens emotionally, becomes guarded. Other man feels it, learns from it, releases it, moves forward without building a permanent emotional home inside it. Same experience, different internal outcome, and over time, that difference becomes visible, not immediately, but slowly, in how their face stops or continues holding the past. Now listen carefully. There is something men rarely talk about. Emotional stiffness. Not physical stiffness. Emotional. The kind that builds when you stop letting things pass through you. When everything starts staying inside instead of moving through. And that's when a man starts to look older than his age. Not because life is heavy, but because it never leaves him. But here's the twist. Looking younger isn't always about being stress-free. Some of the most youthful-looking men are not stress-free at all. They've just learned something very important. Not everything deserves permanent residence in your mind. They let life pass through them. They don't store everything like emotional inventory, and that changes everything. Let me pause and bring you into something personal. Think about your last 5 years. Not the events, but the emotional weight of those events. How much of it are you still carrying daily? Because if your mind is still replaying old situations, your face is still responding to them too, even if you don't notice it. And here's where Jung would probably make you uncomfortable. He suggested that what you don't process consciously, your body processes for you, and it shows up in subtle ways. Tension in the jaw, heaviness in the eyes, tightness in expression, lack of softness in presence, so when someone looks younger than their age, it might mean something surprising. They are not fully free from life, but they are less emotionally trapped in it. Now I want to talk directly to the men watching this, because this is where it gets personal. Some of you don't feel old inside, but your face is starting to reflect something heavier. Not because you're weak, but because you've been strong in silence for too long, and nobody told you that strength without release becomes weight. But here's the part I want you to sit with. If someone tells you, you look younger than your age, it might not just be about appearance. It might be because you haven't fully hardened yet. You still have emotional softness. You still allow curiosity. You still reset after life hits you. And believe it or not, that is rare, especially for men. Why some men look older, not because they suffered more, but because they stopped being emotionally flexible, and also the hidden link between joy, curiosity, and physical aging that almost nobody talks about. But I'll stop here for now, and I want to hear something from you before we continue. When people see you, do they say you look younger, older, or just tired? Be honest, because the next part is going to make that question make a lot more sense. So let's go deeper into this thing, because we left off at something important. Some men don't look older because life was harder for them. They look older because something inside them stopped being flexible. And that, right there, is the real shift. Not age, not time, but flexibility of the mind. Think about this for a second. Have you ever met a man who is still young, but he already moves like everything is final? Like, he expects disappointment before it happens. He assumes people won't change. He already decided how life is. There's no curiosity in him anymore, just conclusions. And that kind of mindset, it starts shaping the face, because the face is not just skin. It's expression memory. It remembers how often you've tightened up emotionally. Carl Jung believed something very deep, that the psyche has layers we don't fully control, and when certain parts of us get ignored for too long, they don't disappear, they show up in other ways, in behavior, in energy, and yes, even in appearance. So when a man still looks younger than his age, it might be because something inside him is still alive in a way others lost. Not childish, alive. There's a difference. Let me make this real again. You know those men you see, maybe in their 40s, 50s, even 60s, but they still laugh easily, still react like things surprise them, still talk like life isn't fully figured out. Those men, they usually carry something interesting. They didn't turn life into a permanent burden. They don't freeze emotionally. They don't lock everything into, "This is how it is now." And because of that, their energy stays lighter, and lighter energy reads as youth. Now let's talk about something men don't like to admit. A lot of men don't age from stress. They age from suppression, not saying what they feel, not releasing what they experience, not expressing frustration in a healthy way, just storing it, stacking it, quietly, and over time. That stack becomes visible, not as emotion anymore, but as presence. You ever notice this? Two men can go through the same situation. Let's say a breakup. One man talks about it, feels it, jokes about it later, moves on. Another man shuts down, stops talking about it, acts fine, but carries it internally for years. Guess which one starts to look heavier over time? It's not about weakness, it's about movement. Emotion is supposed to move. When it doesn't, it settles. And this is where something interesting happens when emotion settles for too long. It doesn't just stay in your mind. It starts changing your expression baseline, meaning your resting face, your default tone, your natural posture. Everything becomes slightly more rigid, not dramatic, just enough to be noticeable over time. But now let's flip it, because there's another group of men, and you've probably seen them too, men who have been through a lot, but still feel light to be around. Not because they had easier lives, but because they don't trap life inside themselves. They let experiences pass through like weather. Rain comes, rain goes. They don't build a permanent home in the storm. And this is where the "you look younger" thing really connects when people say that to a man. What they are often sensing is emotional space, internal softness, lack of tension, overload, presence without pressure. And here's something most people miss. Youthfulness is not just energy level, it's emotional looseness, not carelessness. Looseness. There's a difference. Let's slow it down for a second. Imagine your mind like a room. Some men, their room is packed. Old conversations still sitting in the corner. Old failures still hanging on the wall. Old anger still in the air. Nothing has been removed. Nothing has been rearranged. It's full. And when a room is full, it feels heavy to exist inside it. Other men, same room. But things get cleared out. Not everything, but enough. They don't let everything stay. They create space. And that space, that openness, that lightness, is what people unconsciously read as younger energy. Now let's talk about men in their 60s and beyond for a moment, because this part is actually powerful. Some men at that age look tired of life. Not because of age, but because they stopped engaging with life emotionally a long time ago. They started surviving instead of experiencing, and that shift is visible. But then there are others, men in their 60s, who still joke easily, stay curious, don't carry bitterness everywhere, don't define themselves by their past, and something about them feels different, not young in a childish way, but open, and openness has a youthful signature. Now, here's where I want you to reflect, not answer fast. Just sit with it for a second. When was the last time you felt emotionally light? Not happy. Light. No internal pressure, no mental replay, no emotional weight sitting in the background. Just clear. Because that state, that exact state, is what people are reacting to when they say, "You look younger than your age." And let me say this directly to the men watching. You don't need to erase your past. That's not the point. But you also don't need to carry it like it's still happening, because every time you replay something emotionally, your system responds like it's still real, and over time, that becomes your baseline expression. So let me bring you back to Jung one more time. One of the core ideas in his work is that what is not made conscious controls you quietly. And sometimes It even shows on you, not in dramatic ways, in subtle ones, in your face, in your energy, in how people describe you when you walk away. So when someone says, "You look younger than your age," it might mean, you haven't fully closed your emotional world. You still allow life to move through you. You haven't turned everything into weight yet. You still have space inside you, and that space is rare. Especially for men who have lived long enough to know better. Why some men lose their youthful energy not because of pain, but because they stopped being surprised by life, and how curiosity is actually one of the strongest anti-aging forces nobody talks about. But before that, I want to ask you something real. Be honest. Do you feel like life made you more open? Or more closed? Because your answer says more than you think. And look, before you leave this video, I want to hear something real from you. Not the perfect answer, not the polished one, just the honest one. When people see you, what do they usually say? Do they say you look younger than your age, older than your age, or just tired? Be real with it. Because sometimes what people see on you is just life speaking out loud through your silence. And if this video hits something inside you, don't just scroll away and forget it. Hit the like, not for me, but for the conversation we just had. Subscribe if you want more of these deep talks where we don't just exist, we actually look at what's happening inside us. And share this with someone who needs to hear it, especially a man who's been carrying too much without saying it. Because honestly, some people don't look older or younger by accident. They just carry life differently, and that changes everything. I'll see you in the next one.